Hi, welcome to Centerville Reports Today. I'm Maureen Russell Hodson, and today we are celebrating the golf club at Yankee Trace. And we are doing that with our city manager, Greg Horn, who has been a very big part of that project. Hi, Greg.
Hello, Maureen.
So we're looking at 22 years of Yankee Trace. You've been very involved. You're getting ready to wrap up your career with the city of Centerville and kind of saying goodbye to Yankee Trace. Let's kind of review it from when you first came on board in 1992. There was no golf club at Yankee Trace.
That's correct. It was
some thoughts of it.
It was beyond the vision stage, but yes, when I started July 4th weekend in 1992, the city had spent about a year and a half before I came. Vic Green, a local realtor, and actually had been on council years before that. He had worked closely with Darrell Kenning, the city manager, and they were very quietly behind the scenes piecing together the acquisition of some farms. And the city had acquired about 450 acres of property for the golf course. They had interviewed some golf course consultants. Gene Bates from West Palm Beach, Florida, was selected to be the golf course architect. And he had been working on the project for about a year when I came on board. And just about a month or two before I got there, they'd hired Brian Choi to start working on concepts for a golf course clubhouse. So that was kind of the state of things. The big issue that was up in the air at that point in time was the annexation of the property. The city had been embroiled in litigation with Washington Township over the annexation. Washington Township was opposed to the annexation of the property, even though the city was purchasing it. That went through the court system, which took a little over a year. And finally, I think it was in December, a few months after I got there, that the Ohio Supreme Court ruled unanimously in favor of the Centerville City Council's position and approved the annexation. Then the construction started in late summer of '92. It was going along rather nicely. And then unfortunately, I think it was in maybe mid to late '93, the golf course contractor that we had hired, who came to us with a good reputation and had completed Pipestone in Miamisburg a couple years before, ran up against some financial issues, nothing related to Yankee Trace, but some other investments that they had, and they ended up having to declare bankruptcy. So we actually had to go and attach the bond for the golf course work, the performance bond, and we had to work through Westfield Insurance Agency, bring on another contractor to actually finish the 18 holes. So it was a rather interesting project.
And so you've got a lot of moving parts because you've got the golf course that's been designed, now being built, and then at the same time was the clubhouse being built, and then where does the residential area come in?
The clubhouse was in a very early stage of just kind of conceptual design. So we worked very closely, our staff and myself, with the golf course architect Brian Choi, number of meetings with City Council, refining the look and the feel of the clubhouse. And that was really in '92 and '93 that we worked on that. Also at that time, about 6 months after I came on board, we started interviewing developers to see who would be the master developer for the project. Council had a vision of the type of housing they wanted to see. They wanted to have an opportunity for local builders to be involved as preferred builders. We interviewed several developers, and we ended up hiring Great Traditions Land and Development Company out of Cincinnati. And they were pretty far along at that point in time with the Wetherington Country Club project, a long relationship with them. So we had the golf course architect, and we had the contractor for the building of the golf course. We also had a land planner, David Jansen and Associates out of Colorado. And the city engaged their services, but they worked through the golf course architect and worked very closely with our staff and our planning department, and really helped set the tone for the look and feel of the development. They proposed a concept called windows and focals, and that was essentially to make sure that the roadways that intertwine through the golf course would have various views and vistas, so that even if your home was not located right on the golf course, when you drove home at night or when you left in the morning, you'd have views, kind of snapshot views of the course at different points. So it really made you feel like you were involved in living at the golf course. We often say we wanted people to have a feeling that they were living at a resort, even though they were living in Centerville, Ohio.
Right. Yeah.
So again, David Jansen Associates with the land planners. Then we had civil engineers that we worked with, and then the contractors. So it was a huge team effort. We opened 9 holes in 1994 in August, And those who will remember today, we operated out of a small trailer that fall. And then we opened the remaining 9 holes in spring, actually it was April of 1995. And then we opened the clubhouse the July 4th weekend of 1995.
You also had to assemble a staff at Yankee Trace as well.
We did. That was interesting. I'd been involved in a lot of projects before in other communities, park projects, construction projects, et cetera. I'd never been involved in a golf course project. Gene Bates, our golf course architect, was a great guy to learn from. And he spent quite a bit of time, and I accompanied him on some trips to some other golf courses that he was building in Kentucky and in New Jersey and some other areas to get a feel for how golf course projects were developing over time. We started to put our team together, and the first person that we needed was a director of golf. And at that time, I hired Steve Lambert, who was the director of golf at Shaker Run. Shaker Run had just changed ownership. Steve had been there a long time, was willing to come on board for us, and was very involved in working with the architect and the clubhouse designers and the golf course contractors. Unfortunately, after being on board just several months, Steve was made an offer he couldn't refuse from another potential employer, and ended up leaving us on good terms, but it was very unfortunate. At that point in time, I decided that I was never going to be in a position to put all of our eggs in one basket again. And so we went out to hire a golf course superintendent. And we hired John Miller. And I can remember like it was yesterday going up to Indian Springs up by Mechanicsburg, Ohio, and interviewing a young John Miller, and we brought him on board, and he became our golf course superintendent. John helped oversee the construction and work with the architect then through the remainder of the project. And then about a year later, I think it was probably 1995 before we opened, we hired Terry Taylor. And Terry was the head golf course superintendent at Troy Country Club, and just felt that we needed to have a strong 1-2 punch so that we always knew we had a backup plan. And Terry came on board, and ironically, Terry is still our superintendent today. John worked for us for many years, and then John had an opportunity to be the chief agronomist for the LPGA and travel the world.
Right.
And he is doing that now, but Terry was able to step right up and assume that role. So it worked out very well.
And then you also hired a head golf professional,
yes.
young Brian Hughes.
Yes, so we knew needing a golf course superintendent because the early stages that soon to follow would be a golf professional. And so we interviewed nationwide for golf professionals, and I remember going up to Avenel Golf Club outside of Washington, D.C., and meeting a young man by the name of Brian Hughes, who was an assistant there and was interested in becoming a head golf professional. And Brian came out to Centerville, toured the facilities, and agreed to take the position, and was our first golf course professional, and just did a tremendous job because we had him work with the golf course architect. He was there early enough that he could help establish kind of the look and feel that he wanted in the pro shop area, and work on the indoor academy that we wanted to have, which was very unique for indoor instruction, how we wanted to store our golf carts, the different types of facilities that we needed for maintenance. And so Brian was involved, again, before the building was even constructed. And then we had a third part of that team. And the third part of that team was the food service operation. And we looked all over for food and beverage directors. And finally came upon a gentleman that was the executive chef at Sycamore Creek Country Club just down the road, Steve Shaw. And we brought Steve on board, again, before the building was ever done. Steve worked to help design the kitchen with the architects. He worked on everything from recipes to business plans to job descriptions for hiring his staff. And so those three people at that point, John Miller in the superintendency, and Brian Hughes as our head golf professional, and Steve Shaw, worked together as a team to get us ready for our big opening in July of '95. And one of the things that I stressed to these three individuals early on, and they were extremely capable, was the fact that we could afford to pay them an attractive salary and attractive benefit plan, and really create positions for them that they could hopefully maintain for many years if we didn't have to have the cost of a golf club manager. Because I was kind of the quasi-manager, but I obviously had a city to run as well. So that was our understanding, that if those three would work together no bickering. I didn't have time to go out there to intercede into to differences of opinion, that we could work with those 3 individuals with my participation every few days and not have a club manager. And it worked, I think, very successfully, and we did that for a number of years. Brian Hughes ended up going back east and taking a position several years later. John Miller, as I mentioned, went to the LPGA, and Steve Shaw stayed with us for probably 23 years, 24 years, and just retired here about a year ago.
And when you look at the stability and the longevity of those employees, we've only had, 3 head golf professionals, 2 superintendents,
right,
and 2 directors of food and beverage.
That's correct.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is. And they've surrounded themselves with quality people. And quite frankly, when our food and beverage director recently retired, we were able to bring our banquet manager up, Jason Pyrie, and promote him to food and beverage director and promote some other people within. Terry Taylor was able to assume the duties when John Miller left, and Terry has a very capable assistant now in Justin Crone, who's been with us for many years. So yeah, our city's been blessed. We've had good people. We've kind of been able to keep that pipeline filled, and generally we've had opportunities for advancement from within.
Let's talk about some of the highlights at Yankee. Obviously, the Dayton Open is a biggie.
Yeah, the Dayton Open was, as you know, 5 tremendously fun years. A good friend of mine and former employee who is no longer with us, unfortunately, was Bill Colville. Bill was the city manager in Springboro, Ohio, and they had the Miami Valley Open, which at that time started out as a Nike tour stop. I'm trying to think of the other name, but it escapes me. But it was a Nike tour stop for several years. And then, unfortunately, they lost it. And it was hard to raise the money for those tournaments. They're a very major feat. When they lost it, we didn't think it would probably be back in our area anytime soon. And so I called the PGA Tour right away, and this would have been in early 1999, I guess it was.
And Yankee's relatively a new course.
Yeah, Yankee's
it's
4
4
years old. Introduced myself and said, we'd like to keep this tournament alive. We'd like to move it up the street and have it at Centerville. They said, we would love to talk to you about it maybe for next year in 2000, but there's not enough time left to do it in 99. I spoke to our staff, Brian Hughes and others, and they said, if we don't get it here now, they're not going to bring it here. They'll find another location and that opportunity will be gone. So we contacted them again. We made a trip to Florida. We pressed the issue very hard. We only had 6 months to pull this off, and normally it was a year plus. They agreed to let Yankee Trace host it on a 1-year provisional basis. That was in 1999, and it was the Nike Dayton Open is what we called it. Marilyn McLaughlin, our city clerk, agreed to head up our volunteer corps of probably 150 people or more. We had to raise about $800,000 in the community through sponsorships. We were all very involved in that. It ended up being a true labor of love, and we had a very successful 1999 Nike Dayton Open. Then the PGA Tour switched sponsorships to Buy.com, and we had the Buy.com Dayton Open in 2000, 2001, and 2002. And then in 2003, the PGA Tour switched to Nationwide, and we had that year's first Nationwide Tour again in 2004, I guess it was, or 2003, excuse me. So we had it for 5 years total. It started getting tougher to raise $800,000 or $900,000 in sponsorships. The economy was going through some bubbles at that time, and so the last year we were able to keep it, unfortunately, was 2003. But a lot of tremendous memories. All the people in the community still talk about it. A lot of people volunteered every year, and it was a lot of fun.
And what a feather in the cap.
It was. It was just a neat time for a young course and a very ambitious staff to be involved in that type of endeavor.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing those memories with us. For more questions or information about the golf club at Yankee Trace, you can visit yankeetrace.org or call 438-4653. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.